Did you know that caste discrimination is a very serious issue in the United States? In fact, there is the Equality Lab, which is run by a small group of individuals looking to end caste discrimination in the US, which has paved the way for actual legislation in the state of California.
I strongly support this bill.
I strongly oppose this bill.
Scenes from California's Senate that may create history.
Thank you very much.
California is on the way to becoming the first state in the United States of America to ban caste discrimination.
Caste discrimination will not be tolerated in California.
Interestingly, is a local...
Earlier this year, in February, Seattle became the city to ban caste discrimination.
As we would secure ourselves.
I know this is a deeply emotional bill for both sides of this debate. As an Asian American myself, as the son of Korean immigrants who came to this country, like many of you or your parents, in search of the American dream, I just want to say that it is obviously a foundational principle of this country that we don't have caste here, that this is a country that accepts all.
A 2018 Equality Labs report on caste in the US found that 25% Dalits surveyed faced verbal or physical assault based on their caste. 1 in 3 Dalit students reported being discriminated against during the course of their education. 2 out of 3 Dalits reported being treated unfairly in the workplace. 60% Dalits faced derogatory caste-based jokes. 40% Dalits and 14% Shudras were made to feel unwelcome in places of worship. And 20% Dalits felt discriminated against at a place of business. It is in this context that the California State Senate passed a bill to ban caste discrimination. The bill, approved by a majority in the Senate, will now go to the State Assembly for consideration.
We want the Democrats and Republicans in the US Congress to get the message that this is an international movement with working class solidarity internationally against not only caste oppression but every form of oppression.
Last year, all California state universities, the largest public university system in the United States with nearly 24 universities under its umbrella, added caste to its anti-discrimination policy in a landmark move. Students can now report anti-Dalit bias on campuses. From 1912 to 1916, a champion of Dalit rights and the father of our Constitution, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, spent several years in Harlem, New York as a student. Today, his vision of a caste-free society is moving closer to becoming a reality in the United States of America, home to immigrants not only from India but South Asia as well. Bureau Report, NDTV.
This is in fact a landmark step which has been taken. Think about it. Caste discrimination exists in the United States as well. It's something that not too many people have spoken about. In fact, we're joined by Thenmozhi Soundarajan, who has led the battle. We are very, very privileged, Thenmozhi, to have you on the program. How has this really been the biggest concern, mainstreaming caste discrimination in the United States to a larger audience which perhaps doesn't understand how serious a problem this is?
The thing that's important for everyone in the audience to understand is that people don't have to be experts in caste to know that they don't want discrimination in their institutions. And that's actually one of the most clearest bells that we were able to ring in the United States, is that as people started to learn about how severe caste discrimination was across many different institutions, whether it was in workplaces or housing or educational institutions, people wanted nothing to do with it. And I think it was both a surprise for Americans Americans to see how widespread caste was across all 50 states, but also within the South Asian community, we were in denial about how much we had brought caste over. And I think what's important about bills like SB 403 to end caste discrimination is that it was a way for us to have a reckoning, to talk about some of the pain that is associated with the historical trauma of caste, but also for us to begin to heal from it by bringing a very clear remedy, by making sure that the law clarified its protection for all people oppressed by caste. So this conversation, which has now become a national juggernaut in the United States, has been a really welcome one, especially for people who are not from caste-oppressed contexts, because again, people are unified. They're like, we don't want discrimination in our institutions. It's unlawful against civil and labor rights, so let's stop it. And that's been incredibly healing for so many caste-oppressed people who fled because of caste in our homelands and are now getting remedy for where we are seeing it again emerge in the diaspora.
Thenmozhi, this has been a battle for your, in your entire life. You faced caste discrimination as a child. Could you share with us how it's something that's really hurt you in the past, but it made you much more determined to bring this to a state level, to a national level in the United States, and then try and push through legislation? What has your own experience been?
Well, for me, I think, again, my parents were beneficiaries of reservation. They were doctors that came to the United States. They never expected in their wildest dreams to see caste, reignite here. And yet, I was in grade school where I had the parents of a classmate practice untouchability on me and not want me to eat on their plates as soon as I told them I was Dalit. And I told them I was Dalit out of innocence. I found out through talking about it with my parents, and in trying to understand both what was happening for them as they were processing their own pain of caste. I just blurted it out to people and then inadvertently became in the crosshairs around caste. Right. And this was not a singular incident, throughout my entire life, whether it was going to school at universities like, the UC Berkeley or at MIT or USC, or being in different workplaces as a technologist or as an artist. I have faced extreme violence for being one of the first Dalit activists that was out about my caste identity. And I faced rape threats. I faced death threats. People have tried to find where my parents have lived and tried to beat them up to try to intimidate me in terms of silence. There's been donors who try to deplatform me from speaking when I'm curating or doing art projects. It's an incessant attempt to both gaslight, demean, and shut down my voice as a Dalit civil rights leader, because that's the kind of thuggery that people are used to doing in terms of shutting down caste-oppressed voices. But again, in the United States, that absolutely does not work. Many people, when they hear about the plight of caste-oppressed people, and then they find out the level of violence that, Dalit civil rights leaders like myself face around the issue of caste, not only are they disgusted, they understand it to be unlawful, and it further pushes them to work to make all American institutions safe from caste. So I think it was incredibly painful to go through some of this.
So Thenmozhi, a lot of the protests were coming from Hindu rights activists, Hindu groups who said that you represented a threat to their faith, when in fact your point all along has been that's the last thing that you would want to do, and that discrimination on caste lines had nothing to do with people practicing their faith.
Oh, 100%. I mean, I was born both Hindu and Christian. I have seen caste in actually both of my communities of practice.
I see.
This was never a religious issue. This is actually a civil and labor rights issue. And I also want to make clear the caste equity civil rights movement is deeply intercaste, deeply interfaith, and multiracial, as well as filled with lots of different organizations focused on labor rights, gender rights, you name it. But I think that the people that are afraid of this bill passing not only probably have not read the bill very closely, but are rooted in a fragility. And I guess even to them, I want to share, this bill would protect them because it protects anyone who's being discriminated on the basis of caste. People are being trafficked. People are facing, the loss of their jobs. People are being discriminated on the basis of housing. Caste is also showing up in terms of domestic violence and coercive control. These are serious, unlawful things that are going on.
Thenmozhi, what really strikes me is that people of Indian origin in the United States are some of the most educated, the most affluent, the most influential citizens in your country, and yet you would believe that with their education, with their understanding, the last thing that they would be getting into would be caste discrimination. So education and exposure hasn't exactly stopped what you have faced.
It's not something that can be solved just by a book or by training. People need to deeply be self-reflective about the ways that they continue systems of violence. So I think it's not about class. It's not about wealth and access. People have been deeply trained at a nervous system level to continue discrimination. So the only way to stop it is we have to change the policy, and then we have to work on hearts and minds. And our hope is that we can do both because we are rooted deeply in love.
Yeah.
We are rooted deeply in healing and reconciliation, but we can't reconcile until we stop the discrimination. And that's why bills like SB 403 to end caste discrimination must be passed.
Well, Thenmozhi, you are an inspiration for so many people, not just in your own country, but back home over here as well, in India. It's an incredible fight, and it's amazing what you've been able to achieve, not just with pushing through legislation, but also with the Equality Lab. I'm sure I'll get a chance to speak to you again, but for the moment, thank you very much.